Thank you for being here. I'm Hillary. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is actually my very first video, so what I'm going to be doing is a little bit of a vlog, a reading vlog, but also hobbies and various things that I get up to when I have the time. In this vlog, I'm going to be reading the book The Kingmaker by Kennedy Ryan. I absolutely love Kennedy Ryan. She's a fantastic contemporary romance author. She wrote the Skyland series and also the book Real. Both are just fantastic. So I'm excited to read more of her earlier work. That was actually one of my goals for this year, was to read more of her backlog. I'm also going to be doing a few other things this weekend. I've got Pilates. I'm going to be meeting up with a friend for coffee, catching up on some YouTube videos. Season 2 of Maxton Hall just came out, so I'm really excited to kind of take you along with me and see what we do. So The Kingmaker is the first book in the All the King's Men series. I also have the second book, The Rebel King, and then a prequel or some kind of spin-off. I'm not entirely sure, but I believe this is also part of the series. So I'm really excited to get into these. I have to say, the first couple of chapters of this are so gripping. Lennox is the story's heroine, and she is a member of the Yavapai Apache Nation, which is an American Indian tribe. And she is preparing for her sunrise ceremony or sunrise dance. It's essentially a girl-to-woman transition celebration. And this celebration was actually banned in the late 1800s by the US government. And so these ceremonies became illegal and were happening then in secret, because these are a really sacred ritual for this community. And to her parents about the ceremony, and her mom says that she's off to Seattle tomorrow. There's a protest for that new oil pipeline they're proposing. And she says, injustice doesn't rest, and neither will I. So we're getting a sense that her mom, she's an activist and is preparing to go somewhere after the celebration is over. And then the chapter ends with, I should have made Mama take a dozen more pictures. I should have given her 1,000 kisses. I should have slept at her feet. I would have if I'd known I'd never see her again. So something must go wrong at this protest that her mom goes to. I also wanted to call out before the prologue even starts, so it's part 1. It says, my mother was my first country, the first place I ever lived. That is so beautiful. I love that as the opening for the story, so it kind of tells us that whatever happened to her mother is going to be a big part of the story and of her growth. We get into chapter 1 and we're meeting Maxim, who is our male main character, and we're starting out 4 years later. So the sunrise ceremony happened when she was 13, so now we know she's about 17, and we're just starting to get to meet Maxim. And he's interacting with his father, and it seems like his father runs Cade Energy, which is their family business, and they're actually trying to build a pipeline through native lands. The father's company is, and he's not in agreement with his father, and we actually find out that he is getting a PhD in climate science, and they get into a fight about the father wants him to take over the company one day, and he's saying, I'm not the best person to run this company because, he says, I question the sustainability of fossil fuels as this country's primary energy source. I believe we should be aggressively transitioning to clean energy, solar, wind, electric. And it says later, if you just listen to my ideas about transitioning to clean energy. So he fundamentally disagrees with what his father's company does. He finds out that the pipeline that they're laying actually disturbs sacred burial grounds, and so some of the natives in the area are getting upset. Find out there's actually a protest happening on this site, and he sees a woman pick up a megaphone and start talking into it, and the first thing she says is, can you hear me? Can you see me? It's a girl, a woman. She's young, but there's power in her stance, in her face. The late daylight loves her, kissing the hollows under the rise of her cheekbones. The wind carries her hair as easily as it carries her voice, whipping the dark strands behind her like a pennant on a battlefield. She seems to command the elements as effortlessly as she does the crowd's attention. I love this because it's the first time he's seeing her, and he is impressed by her. He's like taken in by her essence. He immediately wants to like know more about her and learn her story. She goes on to say to the crowd, 4 years ago, on a day like today, my mother left for a protest in Seattle, much like this one. She never came back. So she shakes her head, impervious of the tears streaking her face. I came here to mourn. When it was time for the rite of passage from girlhood to womanhood, I came here to dance. We worship here, we wed here. The ground where you sit are pews. The trees around you are steeples. You are standing in our church. So she's just trying to be like, the land that you're standing on is really meaningful to us, and maybe you don't understand that. So she's trying to, compare it to a church, that something that they would understand is sacred and should not be destroyed. It says her voice rings out commanding and broken, and it ends with, her sorrow takes us hostage. I thought that was really effective. The protest is really starting to pick up, and he's worried that the situation could really escalate. His father's not going to do anything about it, and he sees the dogs start to go towards her, and he runs. He says, I don't stop. Don't think about the line I'm crossing, about my father, the architect of this cruel chaos. I don't consider my own safety, only theirs, hers. And as he's running, it's in italics, so he's thinking, I see you, I hear you, which is a callback to when she got on the megaphone and said, can you see me, can you hear me? So that's the prologue and the first chapter. I'm really being pulled in to the story. I really want to know what happened to her mother. I really want to see what he might do with the strained relationship with his father and the company, and it seems pretty clear he's not going to take over this oil company, but kind of seeing where that might go. 59. Where I left off in my last update is he was running towards the protest. So him, Lennox, and a few other people actually ended up getting arrested. So they're spending some time in a holding cell together and kind of talking and getting to know each other. Lennox assumes that he is just a fellow protester. He doesn't say his full name. He doesn't necessarily say he's there because it was his father's company. He's doing the pipeline. So she doesn't know any of that. But they kind of get to talking in the holding cell, and they're definitely having some chemistry. This is Roscoe, by the way. He wants to join us. He's very clingy sometimes, but he's definitely very curious. Okay, so while they're in the holding cell, he's talking with the group of people, and one of them actually mentions that this whole pipeline project could have been rerouted. And Maxim's like, what do you mean by that? And they say the original proposal ran the pipeline near a suburb about 10 miles north. But then their complaints were immediately listened to, and they decided to move it away from that. And they say that wouldn't have even impacted any kind of water supply. So they had another option. Lennox and Maxim are talking in the holding cell. They're getting to know each other. She's sharing her name and what her first middle names mean. He doesn't share his name right away. She does eventually ask him his name, and he doesn't give his last name. So I think he's trying to avoid telling her that he's related to the man who owns the company building the pipeline. Towards the end of their time together in the holding cell, she mentions something about how her father's going to ground her. And he says, grounded? Exactly how old is the girl who chases stars, which is what one of her names means? And she responds, 17. So he finds out that she's 17. Now, he's in a PhD program, so he must be in at least his early 20s. He's very surprised that she's only... He's very surprised that she's only 17, and he's saying it's not her appearance, it's the things she said at the protest. It's the gravity in her eyes when she looks at you. So he's feeling like she's mature and, she's seen some things that have kind of aged her. Not happy that she's only 17 because he knows that means nothing can happen. Lennox is called by the police officers that someone is there to come get her, and they grab hands before she leaves. And he says, our skin conducts a charge between our palms. That volt hits me somewhere between my chest and my stomach. I wonder if I'm imagining it, but when I look up, her eyes fixed to that one point of connection. She glances up, a mixture of curiosity and pleasure right there to match mine. Except she's 7 fucking teen, and there's no place for pleasure, or even more than the vaguest curiosity between her and me. I drop her hand abruptly, breaking the electric link. Our stare holds an extra second. So they definitely do have some sparks flying here. After she's taken away, his father does come to get him, and he's very angry with him, like wondering what the heck he was doing there, why he went towards the protest, and is basically saying, like, I'm prepared to forgive you if you run this company. And they're having a conversation, and Maxim's basically like, well, if you do this pipeline, I'm never gonna work at Kate Energy. And the father's more or less saying there's nothing you can do to stop it. And the father's threatening to disown him and saying that his program, his degree is worthless and all these things. The father says, you are unsalvageable. And he thinks, unsalvageable. I should have known he'd find a word that went beyond disowned, beyond disgraced, a word that would cut to my core character. So his father has really hurt him in this moment, and his father ends up saying, that's it, we're done. So then we move into part 2 of the book, which is 4 years later. So now she would be 21. He has, I'm assuming, graduated from his PhD program. So I like it that we're advancing a little bit in age. Lennox is about to graduate from college and is going to go on a spring break trip with her friends, and they're going to Amsterdam. In these chapters, we actually learn a little bit more about Lennox and the fact that she is a virgin and is kind of, but maybe not seriously, wondering if she might be asexual. And she's having a conversation with an auntie. They're talking a little bit about having sex for the first time. And then Auntie's saying, I'm not rushing you, honey. I think something kind of froze in you when your mama disappeared. You'll have to let yourself feel again, Lennox. I see it, you know, that reserve you have with everyone, that guard that locks into place when you feel anyone you could care about getting too close. So we're learning a lot about Lennox here. We're learning she's very guarded. She doesn't let people in very closely. She doesn't let her feelings show very easily. And she's been with people. She hasn't had sex with people. And she's, you know, not sure when she's going to be ready for that. When she makes it to Amsterdam with her friends, she's having a conversation with them, kind of telling them what she talked to her auntie about. And she says, maybe I'm asexual or broken. I just don't ever meet guys who seem worth my time, you know? And the friends are kind of like, I don't think you're actually asexual, but also it would be okay if you were. So I appreciated that they're like, I don't think that that's what's happening here, but, you know, we would support you if that was the case. She starts thinking about her mom. Grief is its own kind of intimacy, a bond of sorts between you and the one you lost. No one else feels it the way you do about that person you loved most. And maybe it helps to know someone reaches that same level of despair. I really like this line because it does talk about how grief, like every relationship that you have with each individual person is unique to you and that person alone. And when you're mourning someone, no one else can understand exactly how that feels to you and what you're going through. So Lennox and her friends end up going out in Amsterdam, and it turns out that Maxim is also in Amsterdam, and they are at the same bar, and his friends are kind of, you know, thinking about hitting on some of the girls there, and Maxim actually notices Lennox. He says, she tips her head back so that river of hair falls behind her, and her laughter, warm, rich, throaty, grabs me from across the room, and I know. Hell, I'd know her anywhere. He does end up going to talk to her, and she recognizes him too. She immediately says, Maxim? Says, so you do remember? She says, of course. How could I forget? So they both recognize each other even 4 years later, even though they only met that one time. That's as far as we got. We got to the end of chapter 8. I am liking where this is going. I like that they've aged up a little bit since their last interaction. I'm not usually a huge fan of the virgin trope. I mean, we've even used the term V-card already in this. Very much a focus of her character. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this. So after we left off, they met at that bar. They ended up hanging out that night, catching up, talking about things. They ended up sharing a kiss before they ended the night. And the next day, he took her out on a date. He shares that he's actually going on an expedition to Antarctica that leaves next week for a research project. She's kind of talking about what some of her career prospects are after college. The date goes really well, and he invites her to come home with him. And she admits to him that she is a virgin. So they get back to his place. They're kind of talking through it. he admits that because he's going on this expedition and he has future plans for other trips and, you know, places that he wants to explore, and so he isn't looking for any kind of attachment, and this would just be sex. And she understands, she agrees, she's very clear with him that she wants to do this, so they go for it. And then after that, it's a little bit of a montage of them getting to know each other in various ways. He comes up with a nickname for her. He starts to call her Nyx, the last 3 letters of her name, which is very cute. They're talking, they're getting to know each other, but they're also having a lot of fun. This even includes a scene in an alleyway in the rain. So, you know, Lennox, our girl, went from 0 to public. Yeah. So things are going great for them. They're both kind of realizing they do have feelings for each other, and parting ways isn't going to be as easy as they thought. One of the nights when she stays over, she ends up having a dream about her mother and is yelling and crying in her sleep. Maxim wakes her up and she kind of tells him a little bit more about what happened to her mom. We learn that they actually never found her body. I think she was declared dead, but they never actually found a body, so they weren't able to bury her or anything like that, or you know, do any kind of ceremony or ritual for her death. And she starts to talk about how this is actually not that uncommon for women across tribes to just go missing, and there's not ever the resources invested to find out what happened to them. So that's something that she's actually quite passionate about. We're getting towards the end of this week that they have together, and Maxim actually admits that he needs to go to London for a meeting to prepare for his expedition. And, you know, she's kind of dreading him leaving and really starting to think about the fact that they only have a couple more days together before all of this is over. Once Maxim leaves for London, Lennox is hanging out with her friends and thinking about how she's really starting to develop feelings. She's a little bit afraid she might actually get hurt in this situation after all, even though they've both been very upfront with each other. You know, she's feeling things that she is having trouble hiding. And she ends up getting a phone call from someone who knows her auntie and is working on a political campaign and is offering for her to come work with them. They're saying they need her to come right away, and, you know, she would have to leave before Maxim gets back. She asks why, and they tell her it's because a young girl is missing. She went missing 2 days ago. Her family is Cherokee. They live not far from the pipeline construction sites. This is the 3rd girl to go missing this year from this community. And, you know, she completely understands. She's very aware of these types of statistics and situations. She's very familiar with how the family could be feeling because that's how she felt when her mom went missing. So she says, I'm on my way. So now we know they're not going to get to see each other before he goes to Antarctica. Maxim actually does try to make it back in time, but he doesn't get there before Lennox leaves for Oklahoma. The people who are working on the campaign are really impressed with what she does. They're kind of asking her to continue to work with them. They're going really well with the campaign, like they're making progress, they're seeing results for their efforts. We check in with Maxim. He's on his expedition to Antarctica, and he's talking about how he'll never take the sun for granted again. He says, depression, seasonal affective disorder, vitamin C deficiency, whatever you want to blame for it or call it, it's real. We ate the dark like nightshade, and it was poisonous. Melancholy with every meal. The weight of the endless night can suffocate you if you're not careful. So he's really struggling with the lack of sunlight, and he's been looking through his phone at his pictures from when he was with Lennox, and the people who are on the expedition with him are kind of starting to notice, like, hey, who's this woman? And somebody says to him, she's pretty. And he says, pretty is the least of what she is, but she is that too. So I like that. It's not just that she's, you know, this beautiful woman, and that's the entire reason that he likes her. At the end of Maxim's chapter, some scary stuff happens. His expedition boat is actually hit by an iceberg. So now they're in a bit of an emergency situation. They're going to have to evacuate the boat. They're unsure how they're going to save the boat, which would just cause more environmental issues. Like if that boat sank, it might spill oil into the water, things like that. They're trying to figure out, okay, we need to get the people out safely first, but then we also want to rescue the boat. And a rescue crew actually does come to save them, and assures them that they'll be able to save the boat as well. They ask them, who are you? And they say, oh, I thought you knew. It's Cade Energy, sir. Your father sent us. His father is getting involved. Meanwhile, Lennox is seeing on the news about what's happened with his expedition boat. Really scared and hoping that he's going to be okay. On the news that they're reporting from an airport as they come back. So they've been rescued and, they're back. And she sees Maxim's father, Warren Cade, who she definitely recognizes as the man who built the pipeline and ruined their sacred grounds, and sees him with Maxim and is kind of like, why didn't I notice this sooner? They look exactly alike. So she kind of figures out, wow, that's his father. She immediately feels betrayed because he never did tell her that he was associated with Warren Cade, this man that she absolutely hates. He goes to see her. He finds her at work, actually, and tries to talk to her. She doesn't want to talk to him. She doesn't want to have anything to do with him. She feels very betrayed in that she feels that he lied to her about who he was. They get into a bit of a fight. He feels horrible, and he really missed her. And in fact, like, she was one of the things that kept him going when he was scared. Well, they end up fucking while she's at work in the conference room. Our pleasure reaches the top of our lungs, heedless of who hears beyond the conference room door. Oh, She kind of immediately regrets it. She's like, even though we just did that, we're not. This isn't happening. He's kind of like, you expect that I'll just walk away? And she says, wasn't that the original plan? Since you found out that I'm a Cade, I don't have to hide anymore. There's something you should know about us. And what's that? We get whatever the fuck we want. And I want you, Lennox Moon. I want the girl who chases stars. Well, you can't have her. You can't have me. I can't force you. I wouldn't want you like that anyway. You want time? I respect that. I can't make you give me another chance. I have to leave now for this expedition, but we're not done. Oh yeah, now he's going to the Amazons. She says, I say we are. He says, we're not. Do what you need to do. Change your world. I have to go make my world. But when the time is right, I'll be back for you. And then we end there, and it starts on part 3. by Kennedy Ryan. I really enjoyed this. I did. The last update I gave you, I left off at the end of part 2. So when part 3 starts, we've jumped 10 years ahead, and Lennox is now about 31 years old. And she and her friend Kimbra, who we met earlier in Amsterdam, are political campaign managers, and it seems like they're really killing it. They even nicknamed Lennox the Kingmaker for how much success her candidates have. They try to promote candidates who are going to champion for marginalized groups. Now, Maxim's brother Owen is interested in running for president, and he approaches Lennox asking if Lennox and Kimbra will run his campaign for him. She's a little hesitant at first, but ultimately accepts and tells him that one of her requirements for working with him is that she doesn't interact with his brother, so she doesn't want to interact with Maxim. Meanwhile, we find out from Maxim that this has kind of been his plan all along. He told Owen to ask her to help with his campaign. It seems he really has not moved past Lennox. His thinking is we've had time to kind of do our own things, like she's been able to pursue her career paths, I've been able to do my exploring and start my business. You know, maybe now's the time that we come together. He really has not given up on her, and in fact is quite persistent in pursuing Lennox, even though she tells him multiple times she's not interested or to stop or to stay away, and he doesn't listen. I didn't love that. It made me a little bit uncomfortable. It seemed to me like she was pretty clear she wasn't interested. He kind of ignores it and maybe like sees that as a challenge. And you know, it kind of works. They end up reuniting on New Year's Eve. She kind of explains to him a little bit about some things that she's figured out through therapy, that the reason she was so upset at him for lying wasn't actually for the lie itself. It was more that she was so scared of getting hurt and feeling anything like she felt when she lost her mom. And so she kind of used his lie as an excuse to push him away. But now, you know, they're reuniting at this New Year's Eve party. It's kind of seeming like we're going to get our happily ever after. But hold on a second. In the last 5% of this book, Lennox and Wallace are best friends, brothers. They actually dated a while ago, but now they're more like siblings. They're very close. They're best friends. They're actually doing a service trip to Costa Rica to administer vaccines for the Bree tribe. It actually has one of the largest indigenous populations in Costa Rica and still largely has their culture and language intact. And so they're also bringing a group of students from the reservation to this service trip. The trip is going great. They're making their way to some more remote areas to be able to administer these vaccines. And while they're on their way there, they actually get captured. They are saying to Wallace that he has something that's going to make them a lot of money, and that's why they captured him. Our book ends with one of the men choking Lennox, and she's thinking, oh my god, I'm gonna die. And she's having visions or flashes of people that she loves and like things that have happened in her life, and then it fades to black. What in the cliffhanger was that? That's the fucking end of the book. It was so good though. I need to start Rebel King immediately. So it was effective. I did really like this book. I would recommend checking it out if any of this interested you at all. I really liked parts 1 and 2. There were some parts of part 3 that, you know, were, I don't know, questionable, I guess, for me. Maxim is not my favorite male main character. I'll just say that. I loved how they aged up and they were in their 30s by the time they got together. I also really loved what Kennedy Ryan did with the indigenous people representation in this book. It wasn't just a casual mention for the sake of diversity and representation. It was really entrenched in the story, and you can tell that Kennedy Ryan did a lot of research to try to be accurate. There's even an author's note in the beginning saying, you know, she spoke to various indigenous people to try to reflect their lived experience, and she even gave a few names. So that was really cool. I loved the side characters. I liked that we were getting to know Kimbra a little bit more in part 3. She was mentioned in part 2 when they were on spring break in Amsterdam, but I feel like we really got to know her more in part 3. Same with Wallace. I really loved their dynamic. They just really seemed like supportive best friends. I'm really looking forward to seeing like what the heck happens in the next book, Rebel King, but that is the end of the Kingmaker. I also wanted to talk a little bit about something else I did in this vlog, which was watch season 2 of Maxton Hall. The first 3 episodes were just released. But I loved season 1. I thought the yearning was just top tier. We've got a little bit of a star-crossed lovers kind of storyline happening. He really wants to protect her and save her, and you know, with one exception, she doesn't need saving, and she tells him that. She's like, I don't need you to save me, I'm good. And season 2 starts out where we're more focused on James. He's really having a hard time. His world is kind of falling apart. He's falling apart, and he wants Ruby to save him. And she tells him she can't save him. Only you can save yourself. I really love that because we've seen so many things in the past where, you know, this codependency, this toxic codependency is kind of developed between our main characters, and then they don't know how to function without each other. I'm looking at you, Twilight. And so I was just so excited for like an anti-toxic codependency. Even more than that, you know, by the end of the first 3 episodes, we're learning more about James and how he was raised to not show emotions, not feel emotions, not show any kind of vulnerability whatsoever. And now he's having these really major life events and really big feelings, and you know, they're to the point where he can't push them down, and it's coming out in some scary ways. And so he's starting to try to take the steps to be able to figure out how he can cope in a healthy way without depending on Ruby, without depending on alcohol or drugs, and move on with his own strength. So I'm really loving the direction this is going. I really hope it continues to be a strong show. If you like drama, I highly recommend this show. It's on Prime, and it was filmed in German, so you can either listen to it in German with English subtitles or dub it in English if you don't want to do subtitles. I've actually done it once each way because there's a lot of nonverbal communication in this show, and so if you dub it in English, you can pay more attention to the nonverbal communication, whereas if you're doing the subtitles, at least I am reading the subtitles so much that I kind of miss some of that nonverbal communication. So if you were a fan of The Summer I Turned Pretty, I think you'll like Maxton Hall, so go check that out. Alright, so that's going to wrap up my very first reading vlog. Thank you again for being here. I hope you'll stick around and check out future videos. I'll see you next time. Bye.